talk to me. It's okay.
I want you to talk to Penelope. That's why we're here at this end.
He says he has fun with you, but he says he doesn't know what he wants to do. He gets confused. He doesn't want to retire.
No?
No.
Does he still want to show, do you think? That's what I kind of wonder.
Let me picture that for him. He's still a little nervous. Let me see if he'll focus on it. Yeah, hold on. He says he starts it out with, I don't know, and he goes, I just don't like all those people looking at me. He has a hard time at the shows just with people looking at him. He doesn't mind working with you alone, but actually he's quite shy.
I think that may be he's not a show-off, that's for sure.
It's okay. It's all
I think our best stuff is when no one is peeking.
That's right.
Have you ever thought about going for a walk with your dog, and suddenly he's next to you, eagerly wagging his tail? Or have you ever had the feeling that something wasn't right in the next room, and discovered that your animal friend was locked in there, or having some other problem? These experiences suggest that on a mental or telepathic level, both you and your animal companions can send and receive messages. Penelope Smith has spent much of her life refining her ability to communicate with animals telepathically. Since 1977, Penelope has worked professionally as an animal communication specialist, helping people discover why they are having problems with their animal friends. She tunes in to what the animals are thinking or feeling and tells the owners so that they can find a solution to the problem. Penelope was asked to help this woman and her dog Trapper. He is extremely sensitive to raised voices, will not allow anyone to pick him up, and has several health problems that are being treated with drugs.
When he first came to you, he was really afraid that he would not please you. And he still, believe it or not, even after all these years, he has a feeling like something could go wrong. He has a worry. And the raising your voice, when I pictured you just getting excited or angry or raising your voice, he says, I just can't deal with it. He says, I might be doing something wrong. He internalizes it. He takes it in. And I think that's part of his allergy thing, too, is feeling like he may not, even after all these years, it's emotional.
I don't know why.
You understand? Yeah. Okay. Even after all these years, he feels like, for some reason, he might not measure up. Even though he feels very much like he is a good dog, and he gets a lot of reassurance in the family, he's got this little niggling thing behind him. Interesting. He says that he was thrown out of the back of a truck. And he shows me a picture of it's a pickup truck, open. He jumps in, he's thrown out. He jumps back in, he's thrown out. I don't get a good picture of the person, but it sounds like a man's voice. I just see this truck and then I see somebody's arms. It looks like he was quite attached to somebody before you got him. And that was quite a disappointment for him. I mean, he was meant to be somebody's really loyal dog, which he is, of course, now. But he's never forgotten that, And evidently he was a little bit hurt too by somebody, physically hurt by somebody throwing him. Not badly, but it looks like, he yelped. So then when you pick him up, that both reminds him of that, and I think physically he has had some bashing around. He says, I like you. You're very sweet. He says he feels a lot better. Just having talked about it, that's good. That's good. Will you keep improving, okay?
In my particular case, there was a behavioral problem with one of my horses that she completely solved in one visit. And there was a drastic behavior change. So if I had any doubt at all in her ability, it completely disappeared with the very first visit. And it was sort of like a therapy session. I asked Penelope a simple question, and right away my mare had this, all of this frustration to release, all this tension to release. So what she did was to turn our relationship around. My mare is now the most affectionate animal you could imagine. She runs to the gate when I come, We have a very close relationship. She follows me everywhere. She's very relaxed. And if there is a problem, I know exactly how to deal with it.
So after we'd gone around and seen the llamas, we went back into the house, and she did a reading on one of our dogs, Cider, and spoke of Cider's adventures in other dimensions than this everyday life. And then she turned her attention to Teddy, who immediately began to have a kind of a seizure. He started shaking, and his eyes glazed over, and it seemed as though he wasn't seeing anything. And he had trouble walking. He fell down, actually. This is Teddy. Hi, Teddy, I'm talking about you. Yeah. And we had never seen him have any sort of a seizure before that. And she immediately withdrew her attention from him and had Kelly just hold him, and within about 5 minutes the episode passed. And in the meantime, Penelope and I went off into the other room and did a reading on one of the cats. And then when we came back out, Penelope very gently sort of touched her mind to Teddy's. And he told her he just wanted to be a dog. All the stuff she'd been saying about Cider having other dimensions, that scared him. He didn't want anything to do with that. He was just here to love and be loved. And it was very simple.
Penelope is in such demand that she cannot travel to work with everybody who requests her service. So now she consults with people by phone and tunes in to their animals at a distance. All she needs to know is the animal's name and some basic information, and she can make a telepathic connection, provided the animal and its owner are willing.
We had a young stallion, beautiful young Arabian stallion in training, and he wasn't doing very well. So I decided to have an appointment with Penelope, and she talked to him, although he was 300 miles away. And I was totally blown away.
It's interesting to me that Penelope can do her work by telephone. I mean, she needs the telephone to communicate with the person, or at least the person needs it to communicate with her. But I have called her on several occasions and asked her a question about an animal, and she'll say, "Just a minute, let me ask the animal." And then she's quiet for a moment, and then she comes right back with information which has time and again shown itself to be quite accurate.
The distance does not make any difference as far as reception goes. What makes a difference is whether the person who is calling me is very open and not putting up any blocks, or if they're resistive. If they're worrying about what I'm going to find out from the animal, or if they're testing and skeptical, that puts up almost like a fuzzy screen. It puts up like static on the radio. So you have a hard time hearing the animal. You have a hard time getting past their static to get to the animal. But if they're very open and they just say, "What does my dog think about this?" or "Where does he hurt?" Boom, I can get right through.
This horse trainer tells about an experience with his favorite horse.
And then mysteriously she came up lame. And so I had this inching lame, couldn't walk and could only make baby steps and couldn't lift her head down to eat. And so I had her obviously looked at by, which turned out to be 3 Western medicine vets, and they all could not diagnose what her problem was, and suggested that I take her to Davis, which is the university hospital, and have her looked at and examined up there. So I took her up there, and I left there after 8 to 10 hours of constant examination. And they neither could tell me what was wrong with the horse, but suggested that I put her to sleep. So I came home and I was very upset about having been told I had to put my favorite horse to sleep. And so I was talking to a friend, and she suggested that I call Penelope, who was my first experience with the animal psychic world. And so I called her, and she said, did her work over the telephone, and said there's no way that this horse needed to be put to sleep, that she was just had some massive vertebrae displacement both in her upper spine and in her lower back, and suggested that I have this Dr. Bob Anderson from Oregon, who she recommended, who's a chiropractor and acupuncturist, to work on the horse. It ended up being the best way to get the work done was to have Penelope there also, so Penelope could sort of intervene in the communication and saying, back off, you're doing too much. You know. And this had been stuff that Subretta had carried around for 10 years. I mean, she had her vertebrae displaced for well over 10 years. And it turned out that the story she told was they put her through the racetrack training and she just fought and kicked the whole way because she was mortified that they had separated her from her soulmate, as she described it. And then, I guess, went into the chute of the racetrack and reared up and trashed around in the chute, and that's when she injured herself. You know. But it took many months of just Penelope teaching me on how to communicate with Subretta and look at her from her point of view. It's like now I call her first before I call the vet because of the expense for me, because I have so many horses. It's cheaper for me to call Penelope than for me to call the veterinarian. And she's yet to, there's only been one inaccuracy that she's ever called for me, and that was my last year's foal. I had dreamt and dreamt about having my black boy. And she described it down to the black with 3 white socks and the white blaze, but she was a filly. And
I used to sit in the park, in the playground, in the bushes, and talk to the birds and say, please come to me. I used to picture myself as St. Francis, because St. Francis was a model of mine. And I used to say, little birdies, please come to me. And I close my eyes, I'll close my eyes, come to my hand. And I had birds who came very close and butterflies who landed on my hands. And it was the biggest thrill. You know, to me, to have a wild animal trust you is, as you know, is just melt your heart. You know? So besides having the ability to listen to animals and to be quiet with them and to get their viewpoints from when I was very young, I enhanced the ability by my counselor training, which trained me to really open up, be receptive, and understand what people were saying. So what I do is simply open up and listen and get real quiet, which is real natural, again, for me in communication, is to just get real quiet. I don't go into any trance state, or I don't spend minutes or hours preparing ahead of time. It's something that I can, because of my practice in it, simply be right now here for the animal and listen. The reason that I know that it's not just my imagination is the result. Over and over again, in thousands and thousands of animals I've communicated with, they demonstrate the changes. When I talk with them about upsets they have, problems, things that are confusing to them, why they're behaving the way they are, they change. Behavior changes, they relax. Many times it's drastic, the changes in them, that could happen for no other reason than that they understood, they were understood by me, and that we worked out a solution.
Within the first month that we had her, she killed 4 chickens. My husband became very upset and said that we had to get rid of her, and I became very distressed and reluctant to let go of her, but I finally called the vet and I said, you know, I just don't know if this is going to work because of what's happening. And he said, well, before you get rid of her, call Penelope Smith, because I've referred her to a number of my clients to deal with animal problems, and she's been wonderful. So I called Penelope Smith, and she described exactly what Frenchie's state of mind was at the time, and that was that she had come from a very calm house where she was actually basically neglected. There just wasn't enough time to pay attention to her. She was well fed and not mistreated, but neglected. And she went from that into this situation of 4 acres, endless animals, numbers of people around all the time, and she felt like she was in a circus. And she was just more excitement than she knew what to do with. And when she killed the chickens, it wasn't for the kill, you know, it wasn't for the meat, it was really for the sport of it. And so she told me how to instruct her on the leash to be the guardian of the chickens and, you know, to be their caretaker. And I guess I did that for about 4 or 5 days, and then we kept our eye on her for a long time after that when she was around the chickens. But she hasn't shown any aggressiveness toward the chicken in I would say, a year. She'll now go up and try to smell them.
The first time I called her, last January, she said he was brilliant and can reason. And she was right on. Right on. I mean, and the normal thing to say is, well, the second one's brilliant. And she didn't. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's a little cutie, but And so what I'm saying is that the specific stuff was just incredible. She's just incredible.
At one point I asked her, what was his favorite place? She described it perfectly. She described it perfectly. She didn't know where he was. She'd never been there before, of course. But she asked him, he described it, she described it to me.
As soon as she saw the animals, she started talking. She got so much about them. And the thing that struck me and my husband immediately was that she was picking up on things we knew. So that gave us a real basis for trust of what she said when she made comments that were outside of our experience.
One of the truest signs, at least for me, that you're really getting their communication is it's not what you expect. You get surprised. It's really not.
About 5 years ago, when she was around 17 years old, she pretty much gave up living and started hiding, was underneath the bed a lot. I thought this was the end, But the interesting thing about what went on with her was when she talked to Boogie about why she, was thinking about leaving, it was, well, it's like I'm too old. Cats aren't supposed to live this long, And was like, well, where did you get that idea? And, well, she got this picture of this particular tall guy. Now, this was one of my students who had been over to the house. And when she told me this, what she was getting, I remembered the whole incident when I had, given him Boogie's age. And he had kind of said, what? Cats aren't supposed to live that long, in exactly those words. And I remember those words, and these were the words that Boogie remembered. You remember this incident, Boogie? Yeah, you sure do. Well, that was handled. It was like, well, you can live longer than that and whatever. And just within, the next day, she was up and around already, and she'd been hiding for a week, not coming out hardly to eat, and the sore was getting worse and worse. The sore went away. Within a week, their hair was back, but the sore was healed, and she was who she is.
Telepathic communication is when you receive it, you can get both visual, mental images from the animal, like when you ask an animal what happened. Say a horse has hurt themselves the night before and they have a big gash in their leg and nobody knows how it happened. So I ask them, well, what happened? They will show me a series of pictures, mental pictures of what happened. So they'll show me getting their leg caught in the fence and pulling and it tearing. And that will come in mental pictures. Along with that will usually come their emotions, their feelings about it, their pain, their anxiety. Also, what can come across is a message, sense of audio, of hearing what they say. I feel that I instantly translate into words and I get a message with words. Sometimes they do actually give you phrases because they learn words from hearing them from people over and over again, but most of the time it's a translation into words of a concept. So you get a concept, an idea of what they're saying, which then to tell other people I translate into words. Also, you can get feelings in your own body of how they feel, or feelings in their body. Tuning into their body, you can feel their pain, or you can feel where the energy feels like it's hot or it's about to burst or it's blocked. I get all the senses combined so that to translate it into words sometimes takes a long time, even though it was sort of a instantaneous perception.
My horse all of a sudden seemed to give up on life, and she had been losing weight, and my son had been feeding her because at the time my back was hurting, so he was kind of taking over, going down and putting hay over the fence. And within a 2-week period of time, she had gone from this full, meaty, shiny, lovely mare to this thin, frail, weak horse that could barely get around. And I was so stunned when I had finally recovered from my back injury and gotten down there to see her that it just tore me apart. and I immediately called Penelope. She's my lifeline when it comes to the animals. And I asked her what was going on with Buck, and she said, well, Linda, you have been so negative, and it's affected her in such a way that she feels if she were gone, life would be easier for you. Which, oh my gosh, I mean, that revelation just completely, it was like being punched in the stomach. So I immediately went down to the barn and had a talk with her and told her life would not be better without her, that life would be worse without her. She's been with me for 21 years. And it came down to the backhoe coming out to dig the hole, the veterinarian coming out to put her down, and my friends coming out to support me through the process. But because of the phone call to Penelope, I called everyone and canceled. And she and I started over again with dealing with this negativity that I was putting out. And she's still here. She's beautiful. She's healthy.
Penelope says that most of us can develop the innate ability we have to send and receive messages from all life forms. In order to facilitate this, she has conducted numerous workshops with people and their animal companions to gently guide them in this process.
All kids telepathically communicate with each other, with their parents. Not everybody receives it. The animals do. So they gravitate toward animals. You notice kids, given a choice, will go to another animal, a different animal than a human animal. They gravitate to it because the telepathic communication is in there's no barriers there. So you see a lot of kids are like this, but they quickly lose it because humans are social animals and enjoy the approval of their peers. So quickly, kids learn that in order to get mother's approval, aunt's approval, their peers' approval, they better toe the line. And the line has been in this society that telepathic communication is for flakes, and witches or something. And that it doesn't exist, and animals are stupid, their brains are this small, and they don't think, they don't feel. I mean, you hear people saying this. So basically, my approach to animals and why I am very successful with helping to handle problems is I regard them as who they are, fellow spirits with different costumes and therefore different experiences. A cat is a cat, a dog is a dog, a human is a human, but and so that all colors all our experience. But basically, we're all spirits, and we can all learn from each other, and we all have infinite capacity to understand. And on the most basic, inside, heart-to-heart things, we're all the same.
One of the ways that Penelope helps people tune into animals is through a meditation that has them actually become an animal.
And now choose an animal or let an animal come to you. Feel their presence or visualize them. Whatever animal appears to you, imagine it clearly and notice its physical features. Sense its mental and spiritual qualities. Now, as you feel yourself getting closer to the animal, make a shift and get inside the animal's viewpoint. See things through its eyes. Notice how the body and the body parts feel. Your legs or fins or wings. Your head, skin, fur. Now move around in your animal form. Notice how you move. Notice how it feels. Smell. See. Hear. Touch. Taste. And think as that animal. Express emotions through your animal body, like sadness, fear, anger, boredom, joy.
I had another experience when we got this little gosling
about 8 months ago, 6 or 8 months ago. And she was terrified of everyone. My husband brought her home and put her in a cage, and she was really terrified. And I walked into the cage and realized that she wasn't going to respond very well the way I was approaching her. And so I shifted my thinking process, and I connected with, it's hard to describe how you do that. Penelope, I'm sure, can describe it much better. But I shifted my own consciousness to connect with her consciousness. And she instantly relaxed, because the message that I was giving her was that I was not there to threaten her, I was there to help her. And she bonded to me within a matter of minutes, and if I would sit down on the floor, she would come over and get on my lap. She followed me around for a week, thinking that I was her mother. It was great fun, as a matter of fact.
People find it hard in this culture to get quiet in their minds. I find that the people who have the best results in workshops in learning how to telepathically communicate are those who have been meditators, who have had some kind of spiritual practice where they have observed and themselves and their own thinking and learned how to let it all go and be real quiet. To do this well, you have to kind of go open. Just open your perceptions, get real quiet, and just be here. I found that in workshops, when people start to open up, a lot of times they get messages from all over the place. They start to get names, addresses, music, all kinds of things coming in because they're starting to be receptive. And what you need to do is to focus on the being that you want to get the communication from.
Just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I pulled into a parking lot. And I pulled in next to an open car. It was a convertible, and the driver was sitting behind the driver's wheel, looking off in another direction, distracted, waiting for someone maybe. And there was a dog in the passenger seat. And the dog sort of jumped up on the side of the car and looked at me, and I sat in the van for about 10 minutes, just looking at the dog and trying to make contact. I can definitely make contact now, I know when that happens. Trying to say hello to the dog, and told the dog I was going to get out of the car and maybe come over and say hi again. So I finally did. Get out of the car, I went over, I reached out and touched the dog. I was scratching the dog behind the ears. And the owner hadn't noticed yet. I reached over and got very close to the dog, and finally started talking to her. The owner turned around. She was shocked, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I was just saying hi to the dog." She said the dog has never let anybody come up to the car before, never. I was astounded. I wanted to say, well, we've been talking for the last 10 minutes, but of course I didn't. But there are things like that that happen on a fairly regular basis.
Some people are distracted from focusing on mental impressions by outward appearances.
Just because I feel like he's not really realizing what's going on, but I'm not sure, but he's just nervous. And that was about it.
You'd be surprised what's going on.
Oh. Probably.
See, a lot of things we judge by outer actions.
Right.
Just like you cannot really judge people. You know, I mean, you can go on and on about body language, but just because I fold my arms like this, you know what that's supposed to mean. No. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And dogs can do all kinds of things too that aren't necessarily the whole picture. It's not an analysis. You're not going, I'm going to figure this dog out. It's an opening to them. And a lot of times people get very fooled by the outward appearance. And plus they have their own judgments about the outward appearance. They go, well, this kind of dog, oh, scary. You know, so that stops it. So you have to really be open and start getting those impressions from them. And start getting inside a little bit more. And beyond the physical. This is beyond the physical. People, again, have the idea from all the body things that here's a nervous, frenetic dog who's upset. The guy is not upset, he's not nervous, he's not frenetic. He is an active guy, definitely has an active body. This is one smart, one very quick guy. And so we just sat together now, just being together. And he said, you know, they just don't know. I'm very quick, I want to go places, I want to do things. I'm here to experience the world. And was the concept he gave me. And again, he gave me the feeling he wants you to go places. He wants you to experience things, but with him. He's here to take you around.
You know, if the horse has his head straight up in the neck, and you can see it just really holding, you know, I can see it, you know. I've almost gotten to the point now, which I feel almost funny about saying is I can feel their pain, you know, I can feel the horse going through the pain, you know. And then I, you know, through working with Penelope, I just go into my ability and I get these messages of what to do.
One day I was feeding my horses and I heard all of these little voices in my heart crying for help. And I thought, where is that coming from? So I went exploring and I came across our little pond. Well, the pond had completely dried up and there were about 500 goldfish laying in a mud puddle, gasping for air. And they had sent out the message that they needed help, which I intercepted and therefore took on the task of the whole day of rescuing every one of these tiny little goldfish and taking them up to the house, and then I proceeded to distribute them to people who wanted fish, but at least they all survived.
Are animals always willing to communicate telepathically?
There are occasionally animals who do not wish to communicate. Animals who have been severely abused finally give up on people. They go, you're another person, I don't care who you are, go away. I just want to die. And that has happened to me a few times. Oftentimes I will just tell them, okay, I'm not here to do anything to you. I really appreciate and respect, I will go away. And when you start to go away, a lot of times they will go, wait, you're different, you're kind, you can hear me, I do want to talk to you. But don't force me to do anything. Other times there will be animals who are angry, dominating, manipulate their people, and do not want anybody changing that. They don't want anybody getting in on their game. It's usually animals who themselves have been manipulated and dominated. They turn it around and they start to dominate and manipulate people, and they do not want somebody coming in who knows exactly what they're doing. And sometimes they will actually, it's only been a few cases, but I remember them very well, who actually get violent towards you and go, get out of here or I'm going to go after you. Most animals are joyful and open and relieved to communicate. When you get an animal's attention, even if they're sleeping, they can communicate. In fact, I find, especially with young animals, with puppies or kittens, who are very into and distracted by every little thing that goes around them because they're learning about their environment with their new bodies. When they're sleeping, it's very easy to get right to them as spiritual beings.
Penelope was really able to tell me what the animal's intent was and what to do in this very confusing situation. I had 2 dogs, and after speaking to her, what was happening in the household made sense. And she informed me that the 2 animals were totally opposite in personality and disposition, that there was no way, really, that they were ever going to get along. And if they were kept together, it would be dangerous, which it had already been because one of them had injured me. And she was able to tell me that one animal, which is the one I have now, is so close and in tune with me that if I were to give him away or find a new home, he would die. He would not be able to handle the separation. And the other one had such a light and happy type disposition that he would do well and find for himself people that would be good for him.
Penelope has just introduced some new chickens to her flock and wants to find out how they are doing.
She says she likes it here. It's very different and it's fun. I'm glad to see that they're all happy. Nobody's worried about anything, and there's a sense of exploration and curiosity. Again, I'm translating their concepts into words. They're not speaking English, they're just thinking ideas, and I'm translating them into words. They talk to each other, but it's more on a very, just a very energetic understanding, like a feeling of each other, and then they'll greet each other, and they will tell each other things like, I just found some nice bugs over here if you're a chicken, or come over here and sit down with me. They'll call each other, and then they'll sit down, and then they just share each other. They don't think while they're with each other, so they don't hold intellectual conversations generally. although they're capable of that, it does not seem to go with the being. Where with humankind, a lot of times there is a desire to analyze. I do think that we are the most analyzing creatures. Although other creatures definitely analyze for their survival, for their enhancement of what they need to do. They're pushed to analyze, but not to the extent of about ideas that people do. When I start to get people to read to their animals, to include them in their love of poetry or art, the animals start to extend into that. They go, well, my human likes it. Oh, I like it too. I see what you're looking at. I see why you like that room the way it is. But basic to all of us is an appreciation, I think, of emotions and also the higher truths of life. Love, honor, respect. A lot of times when people ask me, what are they thinking? I go, nothing. And they don't understand that. How can they not be thinking something? And it's really just being. It's sort of like a meditative state of just being there with the environment, being quiet, fully experiencing. Just experiencing. Like, okay, what is he saying with this crow? What he said was, I'm here. I'm here. It's an announcement. Also, there was a sense of relief. When he crowed, there was a sense of, I'm here, things are good, I'm fine. You know, but again, it's not an intellectualization of verbiage, it's a feeling. I'm here, I'm here. And the other one, I'm here too.
You know how exasperating it is when you're driving down the road, the windows are closed, there's a fly, it's constantly flying into your face. And here I was with Penelope in the other seat. I was driving down the road, batting at this fly mindlessly, trying to get it out of my face, wishing the thing would just disappear, die. And all of a sudden Penelope looked over, she took her hand, she cupped it, and she said, here, let me show you the way out. She rolled down the window, the fly stayed right here in the cup of her hand, and she just moved it over towards the window. I was so embarrassed because suddenly I realized, you know, that this was part of it. This little fly was part of the whole that I was supposed to be aware of.
They love it when you go home and start opening up to them. They just love it. They'll change their attitude, their behavior, their postures, everything. You know, even like people have brought up different examples of the consultations. Why did that cat change? Well, we connected. They connected with somebody who listened to them and related to their person who matters to them. And they go, oh, relief, great. They understand my pain, and now I can release the pain. And, you know, they understand I feel this way, and great, now I can change. Now it feels good. Psychosomatic illnesses are common in animals, especially in domesticated animals, who often are subject to the same stresses that people are, and are subject to the stresses from their people that then precipitate illness. They'll get upset about changes in their environment, people coming and going, people being upset with each other, people having fights with each other, and the animal will come down with an illness, which is precipitated by stress of emotion. And if you can help the animal to release and look at and then talk about and release the emotion, and then also help to change the environment that's causing the stress, you can help to heal the illness. When you have that special connection, and you really connect with them as spirits, and you know who they are, they know who you are, there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it.
My heart hears the animals almost like they're on a loudspeaker, and there's nothing I can do to avoid it. I'll be walking along and I'll hear some animal saying, I need water, or I'm hungry, or I hurt. And it isn't that I hear through my ears, it's that I hear through my heart. So I take action on that.
We learn from our animals, or we can learn if we're open to that. And Travis is really a teacher to me in many, many ways. He reflects many times what I'm going through. And sometimes when Penelope talks to me about why Travis is moody, she's really talking to me too. She doesn't say that, but I know, I can tell.
One of my favorite cats, who's quite an old lady now and spends most of her time asleep in the bedroom, she said that when I take naps, Nia, particularly, or sometimes at night, but particularly when I take naps, Nia, the cat, feeds me ideas. And I can't say that I've experienced that. That one was one that stretched my sense of reality. But I have to admit that I've given Nia a little bit more respect since then, and I talk to her and relate to her in a different way. And I think that's a lot of what's important to me in Penelope's work, is that she has expanded my sense of who these beings are, these dogs and cats and whatever.
I just very much appreciate that there's someone like Penelope out there who's specializing in this field. I think that at this point in time in our own evolution of the planet, where we've been decimating the environment, including the animal populations in the environment, that she's really important in raising people's consciousness about the value of those beings, and raising people's consciousness to the fact that we can communicate with them. They're not just some foreign object out there that that we can do anything we like with, but they do have a real important part in the whole scheme of things, and that we can talk with them. She's my hero because she's changed things for me on several different levels. Of course, the individual problems with my mare that she's solved have made my life easier and our relationships closer. But she's also done something on a broader level. I grew up loving animals, wanting to be near them, wanting to understand them, and feeling sort of responsible for every living thing on the earth. I've always felt that we're responsible for each other and that everything was part of a whole. And I felt that there ought to be some communication with animals. But there's always been that gap there, that language gap, and that misunderstanding of their intelligence and their awareness. And there was always some doubt in my mind as to how we could pull everything together. And it only took one visit from her to completely eliminate that gap.
Many animals will respond incredibly to music, to art. In fact, people are finally catching up to what animals have been doing for years. Elephants have been creating art with their trunks. They have very facile trunks like our hands, and they can actually create designs and drawings, which people are now recognizing, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. Whales sing and do complicated songs. Dolphins also communicate in a way that people are just beginning to understand. Bees dance. They have incredible harmonies, rhythms, sharing of aesthetics, not necessarily the exact same way that we express it. They express it their own ways, but it's still beautiful, and they understand beauty, and they understand truth, and they understand companionship and love, and all the things that we regard as real basic, and when you come right down to it, are the real fundamentals of life. I don't feel that any being is complete without awareness and connection with other beings. On this planet are all kinds of beings, animals, plants, minerals, the earth. The more complete we are, the more we communicate with other beings. The more aware we are, the more expanded, the more we extend to all of life. And I think your joy of living goes up in accordance with how much you are in touch with everything around you, how much you sing, as the canary singing, with the rest of life. So I find the more I communicate with animals and trees and rocks, believe it or not, and the planet Earth and everything around me, the more life seems full, rich, deep, loving, kind, wise. And the animals share that with you. They share it on a very intuitive basis. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to intellectualize about it. You just feel it. You feel the vibrations of it. You feel the energy. You feel the connection. You know it. Fine if you can express it verbally or intellectually or analyze it, but that isn't the experience. That's an expression of the experience. And the more you experience other beings, I feel the more wise and loving being you become.